Thank you very much.
When I was first asked to do something on organized chaos, to be honest with you, I didn't think about economics. I thought about my sock drawer. Because I've always tried to organize my socks. I was very happy when socks appeared where you could have each day of the week on them. I thought that's very well organized. I didn't really think about the fact that it might be a bit difficult if someone asked me what day it was to get my sock out and tell them. But then the other side was, I soon realized there was chaos. That one sock would get a hole in it, one sock would disappear, and always there's a sock that goes into the washing machine and doesn't come out. And people say, no. It's absolutely impossible for socks to be swallowed by machines. But I find that they do get. And after a while, I'd end up with just 3 days of the week, and chaos had replaced the organization. So it taught me that organized chaos is a good description of life as it is normally lived by human beings. But then we move to economists. How far do economists see that life is organized chaos? One thing I've noticed over the last few years, maybe the last few decades, is an increasing use of mathematics in economics, an increasing emphasis upon mathematics in economics. When I read articles, they often have huge formulae which seem to crawl across the page like insects. And I found this book quite interesting, The Economist in Lab Coat. The idea that economists, like doctors, like physicists, might walk around a building like this in a white coat. And it made me think, is it really the case that economics as a discipline can ever really be like those hard sciences, physics, chemistry, that I sometimes think it tries to aspire to? And that made me think a bit about possible differences between economics and, shall we say, physics. Let's take physics for a moment. The most famous physicist was perhaps Isaac Newton, at least before Einstein. And he is known for an event where he sat in a garden and an apple fell onto his head. This may or may not have actually happened, but let's assume it did. In fact, he was studying in Cambridge, and there was an outbreak of plague, and he hurried off into the countryside and started working in a garden, sitting under an apple tree, and an apple fell on his head. And this helped him with his physics, so it is said, and helped him understand what then became known as the law of gravity. Well, one thing we know did not happen is that the apples got together at the top of the tree and decided that the last thing they wanted in their space was some long-haired physicist sitting on a chair. So they were going to drop him a little reminder that this was their tree, not his. Then again, what Newton discovered had a lot of useful applications to the trajectory of a cannonball. But once again, no cannonball is going to sit there inside the cannon and decide, I don't really want to go out and fly at 100 miles an hour and land in mud and explode into bits and perhaps destroy a couple of Frenchmen in the process. I've nothing against the French, I'm not going to do that. No, cannonballs don't make decisions any more than apples do. But when we move to economics, we move to a decision where its causal laws, unlike the laws that apply to physics and chemistry operate through human agency. And that means the organized chaos of human life, of people struggling to work out which socks they should wear and what's happened to the ones that went into the washing machine and refused to come out. This is something that changes the nature of the discipline unless the economist believes that somehow you can understand human beings to behave in such a rational and organized way that they can be like cannonballs or apples. And I'm not convinced that's true. I read an article about 3 years ago. It was printed in the New York Times, and it was called, "What Would You Outsource If You Could?" And it talked about, it was written by two graduate students at Berkeley in California, Emi Nakamura and John Steinson. And they were ambitious people, and they decided that on the basis of a cost-benefit analysis, the best way to maximize their earnings was to hire someone while they were graduate students to wash their socks and do other laundry for them. They also hired a personal chef to come and deliver them meals. They even hired someone to put together their IKEA furniture. And of course, we all know the fun is when you try to put your IKEA furniture together, and they paid this person more to put the furniture together than they paid to buy the furniture in the first place. But their argument was, this is an investment. And on the basis of having the time released from the articles I'm writing, I will be able to earn a lot more than if I tried to make my own meals and solve the problem of why my socks disappear in the washing machine. Well, they did become professors at Berkeley University. So you could say they proved their approach was right. But I then went to the website of Berkeley and looked at something of what they were doing now. And I discovered that these two research students had got married and they'd had 2 children. So they must have taken a little bit of time off work. And one of the children was now 2 years old, and John Steinson, he comes from Iceland. And there was nothing he liked better than to take his 2-year-old son up the slopes and teach him to ski. And I thought, well, you've changed a bit. I'm married to a Czech, and there are slopes in the Czech Republic, and I've tried taking 2-year-olds up the slopes to teach them to ski, and it's a lot more difficult than finding out where your socks are. But obviously, he's not thinking anymore that a cost-benefit analysis would require him to get a ski instructor to do this sort of thing. He seems to have become rather more human. And perhaps his calculations of what would bring him the most financial reward have changed since he's had children. Does that mean that economics is, that economists are unable to make the sort of predictions that physicists can? I think in a way we can say, yes, they can't make the same sort of predictions. To give an example,
Edmund Halley. 300 years ago, 3 centuries ago, Edmund Halley discovered a comet. Perhaps he didn't discover the comet, he observed a bright spot in the sky and explained why it came back every 76 years. Every 76 years. It can be predicted. At the time, 3 centuries ago, people didn't know why the sky suddenly lit up with a bright light. They thought it was maybe a divine thunderbolt. Maybe God is punishing us for some reason. We've burned too many heretics. We haven't burned enough heretics, whatever. Halley said, no, this is science, not theology. This comes every 76 years, and it will come back. And indeed, I can say that in 2061, Halley's comet will come back. That can be fairly certainly predicted. I agree, nothing can be absolutely certain. But I think Halley's comet will be back in 2061. So all of you, I should think, will be able to see it. I think I might have to give it a miss. Okay, let's take another example now. The Queen of England, in 2008, she went to open a building in the London School of Economics. And of course, they got prepared for this visit, as people do, and you know, they did rehearsals. And they were probably as scared as anyone would be giving a TEDx talk. And, oh, what will she say? And she'll say, you're the dean, are you? Oh, yes, Your Majesty. And this is your building, your new building. Yes, Your Majesty. You know, so they got it all very clearly worked out. But the Queen, who'd been at that time on the throne for more than half a century, she wasn't going to have any of that. You know, she'd seen prime ministers from Churchill right through to the modern day. So when she had 4 economists, she said to them, why did no one predict the financial crisis? This was in 2008. Not like Halley's comet, there was a stunned silence. Nobody gave an answer. They couldn't think of what to say. Maybe the economists thought of a machine down in the bowels of the London School of Economics. It used to exist there. It was called the Phillips machine. Those of you who do economics will know Bill Phillips, who developed the Phillips curve. Bill Phillips was actually an engineer in his early life. In fact, he was, fun fact, for a while he was a crocodile hunter. He came from New Zealand, but spent time in Australia. Then he went to England, and he went to the London School of Economics, and he built this huge machine in the bowels of the LSE, the hydraulic machine, to illustrate how money flowed through the UK economy. And they liked this machine so much, they gave him a lectureship in economics, and later became a professor of economics. And 12 of these machines were exported to other countries. So maybe the economists thought about that machine and imagined that it would be as easy to say why the financial crisis had arrived as it would be to see how water moving through various tubes and valves in this machine would lead to a certain result. But of course they couldn't. The Queen got a reply 4 years later. And the reply said, well, we think the city got a bit complacent. Complacent. But that's a human failing. That's not something that you can apply to the apples, to the cannonballs, or let's think of those electrons whizzing around in the Hadron Collider in Switzerland. You wouldn't sort of tap them one day and say, they're being a bit lazy. I really wish that they would learn to move around a bit more quickly. No. This is something that applies to human beings. And for that reason, I think that we have to see economics as a little different. Now, we'll spread the uncertainty around a little. It is true, isn't it, that at the subatomic level, it seems that there's uncertainty about how electrons will move. It seems that randomness rules at that subatomic level. So maybe there's uncertainty built in to the hard sciences as well. You'll know about chaos theory, the idea that a fluttering wing of a butterfly here could cause a hurricane in the Caribbean. Lorenz talked about that. So there is an element of uncertainty as well in the hard sciences. But the important thing, I think, is that we have to accept that uncertainty in economics as we accept that uncertainty in life. You can't have a crystal ball, whether you're an economist trying to understand when the next financial crisis will come. I think economists are, more than they realize, like historians rather than mathematicians. They can have a very good idea of what's going on, but that element of uncertainty won't go away. A historian can explain that there were various causes of the First World War, but you would not see a historian predicting when the Third World War will be. I hope it won't happen. But it's not a case where you can have the sort of prediction that you can about Halley's Comet. So we have to accept the uncertainty. You can organize yourself in the chaos. You can't organize yourself away from the chaos. And that's true, I think, of economics, and it's certainly true of my sock drawer. Thank you very much.